Hey guys, Troy Haynes from The Space. I am here as part of our ongoing masterclass series with Donna Patane. Hey Donna.
Hello.
Thanks for beaming in to discuss branding and trademarks.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Over to you, Donna.
Right, this is my favorite topic ever to talk about because I think it's important for every business and every startup and something that will, should be applying, should come up to anyone who might be listening.
Awesome.
So first things first, this is a discussion I have with a lot of clients, with a lot of people in, events that I go to. I've presented on this topic a lot. My really cool little picture there is because usually I talk about bringing a sword to a gunfight because I really like, that scene in Indiana Jones where Indiana Jones comes across this guy with a sword and he's doing all this really cool sword work and then he pulls out a gun and shoots him. So I liken that situation to what happens if you don't have the right kind of name registration. So in terms of the battle, which is the sword and which is the gun, the different name registrations have different benefits and different weights. So I generally rank them in this order: company name, domain name, business name, trademark. So the company name is something that you have chosen if you are incorporated and you have registered a company through ASIC, and it might be, Donna's Widgets Pty Ltd, and you get an ACN. That doesn't give you any right to the name. It just says you can call your company that and put it on your letterhead and on your tax invoices and, make sure it does a tax return and your VAT statements and whatever. It really doesn't have anything to do with name protections. It's just designed for creating that separate legal entity. The next one is your domain name, which is your www.donnaswidgets.com or .au or whatever you've chosen. That system really just is designed to have somewhere to plonk your website. Where are you on the internet? And it's useful, in terms of people being able to find you. But it doesn't really give you any exclusivity to the name in the marketplace more broadly. There are some rules that apply if you're dealing with the .au second level domain space. So if you've got .com.au, .net.au, .org.au, AUDA, that AUDA, has special rules in terms of who's entitled to hold those. So you can, there's some sort of things you can do if someone's using a domain that's similar to your business name. But it's really not designed to protect the name more broadly in the marketplace. The next option for registration, and usually this is the one that people mention, I have this sword, is the business name. And the business name registration is again through ASIC as a result of changes a couple of years ago. And it's a national registration for identifying who is operating a business. So the purpose of that legislation was actually to protect consumers. They can identify, I've been dealing with this business, Donna's Widgets, and they're totally dodgy. Who is it that's actually operating that I need to complain to or to sue? So it's a system for identifying who is trading as that particular business name. And ASIC will do a bit of a search within ASIC's registers, so within the company and business name registers, to make sure there's nothing the same or basically the same, but otherwise it'll let you through and you can use it, and they don't really sort of care what else might be happening in the marketplace. Because that system is designed for mainly consumer protection and just to allow you to kind of use it as you want to use it, it's not designed to give you any kind of exclusivity or national rights to sue others. That's not what that system is designed for. That is what the trademark system is designed for. So back to my analogy, the trademark registration is the gun in the fight between the sword and the gun. That's because that's what the system is designed for. It's a far more rigorous system. It's got, higher legal tests that need to apply. It requires a registration process, which I'll go through in a bit. And because of all of those different sort of, boxes you need to tick and process you need to go through, once it is granted, you do get exclusive national rights to use it and to sue others if they're using anything that is like it, basically. So, kaput, it's the gun.
And is there a time frame on that? Like, is it ongoing indefinitely, or do you need to
I can do, yes. So once it's registered, it's good for 10 years. And then in 9 years and 9 months, basically, they send you a letter saying, do you still want this? And you pay another couple of $100 and it's good for another 10 years. So there's a lot on the register. There's a lot that have expired or are not renewed, but there's a lot that are quite old because, you know, the Coca-Cola type marks, big brands like that have marks that have, you know, have been going for decades. If you're still using it, keep paying the fee, and it's still, you know, good to enforce.
Cool. And again, like looking at it from a global perspective, is that something that you need to register in each country? And is there a unified body that helps with that process?
Yes, there is. So all of those registrations are Australia only because a country's laws can only affect a country's citizens. So if you're looking to trade overseas, you need to apply for registration overseas as well. I might talk a bit about that when we talk about the registration process.
Cool.
So in terms of what is the trademark, this is what the law talks about. You know, a letter, a word, a device, an aspect of packaging, shape, color. Yes, you can do sounds and scents. The Harley motorbike sound is a registered trademark. Random things like that. But generally it will be the logos. It's the words and the logos that you see in the marketplace, on the internet, everywhere. And it's the device that someone is using to identify themselves within the marketplace. And I suppose it may be that it's your name that you're using. It could be the logo that you're using. It can be both of them together. And in terms of the trademark process itself, you can apply for registration of all of the above. So you could do just your name. You could do just your logo if it's, you know, a bit tricky looking, or you can do them together. The decision making behind that is always based on cost to start with, and based on the protection that you want. So whatever you apply for registration for is what is protected. So if you apply for registration for your name, then your logo is not protected. And if someone uses a similar logo, you can't sue on that because you haven't filed your logo. So it's usually part of the discussion of sort of about IP strategy, really. Do we need them both covered? Can we do them together? So I'll usually talk to a client about what might be best for them in terms of sort of the cost benefit analysis and what they might need.
So just going to say, with regards to the name, I couldn't go and register, say, Troy Haynes, or maybe I could. It needs to, if it's common names, then say, for example, I don't know, like Cairns Dentist. Yeah, great example. Well, then it's too common to be able to. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you file an application, you specify who you are and what it is you want to protect and what kinds of goods and services you provide. There's 45 to pick from, and you pick, well, I'm only providing dental services, so I only need class 41 or whatever it is. And when you file all of that, the examiner will look at it, and which they'll check their basic details, but they'll also consider whether or not the mark, name, or the logo you have submitted is inherently distinctive. And that means it needs to have something about it that makes it distinctive to, you know, your business or a business, I suppose, in that kind of industry. If it's not distinctive and it's more descriptive, or it's kind of descriptive but kind of distinctive, you'll get an adverse report from the examiner saying, this is too descriptive. And the legal requirements are, if it's something that's descriptive and other traders would want to use that name or phrase in the course of business without improper motive, so without trying to pass off or something like that, then you can't have exclusivity. Because if I was to call myself Cairns Dentist, and there are other dentists in Cairns that provide dental services and they're located in Cairns, really they should be able to say we're dentists in Cairns as well. So if it's too descriptive, you won't be able to get trademark registration because other people should be entitled to use descriptive phrases as well. If you were to add something to it, to, you know, say, I need a pseudonym, Patane's dental practice shindigs or something, adding extra less descriptive features means that you might be able to get it through. So you need to make sure that there's enough distinctive, unusual stuff in the name or the logo to make sure it gets through.
Cool. But that doesn't...
I'm not in the business of creating distinctive names.
But then, so if that was the case, well, then you'd fall back on just securing your mark so that nobody copies your logo.
Yeah. So if I have a discussion with someone really early on and they haven't yet settled on their business name,
yeah,
I will give them that advice. I'll say to them, make sure you're picking something that's distinctive. Don't be descriptive. And they'll usually say to me, oh, but SEOs and that sort of thing. Yeah, I understand. And you can still add your descriptors in your tagline or elsewhere in your narrative. But your branding itself, if you want to gain any kind of exclusivity and build up value in that exclusivity, needs to be distinctive, needs to be funky, unique. Google, yeah.
That's actually a really good point. So particularly at the early stage, make it as unique as possible.
Yeah, and if we do that straight up, then the value that starts to build, the brand awareness will build, in that particular distinctive name from day one. If it's been a couple of years, then we'll need to have a discussion about, well, we're going to have to add a logo. We're going to have to add something to this descriptive name in order to have any chance of getting the trademark registered and therefore any chance of exclusive rights.
I had a story, and I hope I get this right, but there was a principal, he was sending out a school newsletter to parents, and he was saying something about, using cling wrap to wrap lunches and so forth. And he got a letter from the makers of cling wrap saying, hey, you can't actually use cling wrap in that context because it's breaching our trademark rights because it had become common terminology. So can it work in that sense as well?
Yeah, so this tends to happen for when someone has a new product that's probably patented and they have a brand name that goes with the product, and then because it's been patented and no one else has been supplying it, its brand name is the name for the product and they're one and the same. And it is possible to have a trademark removed from the register on the basis that it has now become generic. So think about trampoline. What else do you put a an esky, Ugg boots? Like there's a bunch of these on the system that...
and we say stuff like, I'll Google it as well, it's like I'm going to use a search engine to find what I want, but it's I'll Google it. So it's become that point of that terminology. Yeah,
a descriptor. So Google had that dispute probably only about 2 years ago now, but defended on the basis that, well, when people say Google it, they don't mean go to any search engine. They mean come to our branded Google search engine, and we're able to save it that way. Band-Aid had a similar dispute. Band-Aid? What else do you call Band-Aids? So you'll now notice that any Band-Aids at the shops will say Band-Aid as the brand name and then self-adhesive strips underneath.
Yeah, wow.
So you don't need a Band-Aid, you need a self-adhesive strip.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So, and also a consideration for, say, for example, someone's been trading in the market for a long time using a brand and they hadn't trademarked it, and then Joe Smith comes along and puts a trademark application in and says, hey, no, I'm going to trademark, you can't use that anymore. Can you talk us through that scenario and what the consequences are?
Yeah, so the main consequence is going to be fun for Donna because it's gone from a fairly simple issue to a kind of a complicated issue. So trademark registration in Australia, at least, is based on a first to use rule. So that means the first person to use the brand or mark in the marketplace is entitled to registration. So if you have been, and there's no obligation to register before you use it in the marketplace. So correct, yeah. So I've talked before about how a patent or a design must be applied for before you send it to market. Same rule doesn't apply for trademarks. So if you've been using the mark for decades even in the marketplace, you can decide today that, hey, we should probably get the gun for the fight and register our trademark, and that's completely acceptable. You can totally apply for registration now. If someone beats you to it then part of the registration process includes an opposition period. So you file your application, set out your details, the examiner checks it and makes sure it's okay, and then the mark is advertised, and there's 2 months during which anyone can oppose the registration. If you happen to be checking the register, which no one does,
Who does that?
yeah, and you see it and you take action within this tiny window of 2 months, you can oppose the registration on the basis that you are the first user and therefore entitled to registration, and block that application from going any further. And the only times I've had this come up is where we're already having a fight and then both of us file and we'll miss each other by a couple of days. So I've never had someone say, oh, I've been trading for 30 years and I've just seen this on the register. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, okay.
So it's usually when we're already in some kind of tussle.
Gotcha.
And we oppose, and generally whoever's been using it longest, and it can't be by a couple of days or a couple of weeks. Usually for there to be a clear winner, there needs to be years of use prior to the party using theirs. So if you miss that tiny window and it gets registered, and then they write you a letter saying, I have a registered trademark, you need to stop using it, you still have similar sort of options in that you can apply for it to be removed on the basis that it should not have been granted because they're not the user, they're not the original owner, you were using it first. But quite often this will be further complicated by the slightly different tests that apply for those processes and the logos that everyone's using. So what has been registered and what have you been using? And those battles will depend on a legal test of substantially identical or deceptively similar. So they need to be pretty bang on in order to, be able to block one or the other. So, and inevitably it will be some kind of threat, at least of court proceedings, to remove the trademark from the register, countermand with, proceedings to rebrand and that sort of stuff and pay damages and whatever. But more often than not, there'll be some kind of settlement. And if someone's, being essentially a trademark squatter, so they see marks in the marketplace, check that they're not registered, go and file an application, and then we'll essentially try and make demands and insist that you buy the mark from them for a couple of $1,000. It kind of works because quite often paying a couple of grand to buy the registration that someone else has done is cheaper and quicker than fighting a full, court process to have it removed. It'll be a delightful mess.
Wow, cool. Those considerations there. So long story short is choose your name wisely from the beginning.
Yeah. And
then once you're set on your name, try to make it as distinctive as possible, and then file for, obviously tick off the other IP considerations that you mentioned, business name, domain name, but then bring your gun, which is your trademark, both name and mark. Yep. Mm-hmm. Cool.
Then I suppose the next logical step is, do you want to go overseas? So Australian laws will affect what's going on in Australia, but each other country has their own laws to affect what's going on in their countries. And because the planet is shrinking, it's a very digital world nowadays, there is a system called the Madrid Protocol, which allows you to extend your registration. So you register in Australia first, and then you've got 6 months within which to apply for registration overseas if you want to get the benefit of an early priority date. And you file, it's kind of an international application, but it's not. You file a Madrid application and you pick which countries you want protection in. So I suppose you could pick all of the countries and pay some astronomical fee, because you've got to pay the application fees for every country you pick. But usually we'll be strategic about it. We want to sell into Southeast Asia and New Zealand and Japan or something like that. Tick off which ones you want to do, and then WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, will facilitate getting the information to the ones you tick, and then it will be subject to a national examination in those countries before you get back any responses and registrations. So,
yeah, cool. Similar to the other IP protection processes.
Yeah, similar process, all looked after by WIPO. The other thing I should mention is there's a few odd omissions from the Madrid Protocol, like Canada, get on board. It's weird. And the other thing is, although Australia has a first to use rule, so whoever is the first to use the mark pretty well within the marketplace is entitled to registration. That rule applies to most countries, but does not apply to, in particular, China. So if you're considering exporting into China or marketing your goods or services to citizens within China, you need to file there sooner rather than later. Because if someone beats you to it, you're stuffed, dead in the water. There's nothing you can do about it because they operate on a first to file basis. Whoever gets their application filed first is entitled to it. So there's even been the likes of Michael Jordan had issues with his brand being used in China. Dude, you weren't first. Apple has had issues in China. So it's, I mean, for those big brands, there's people, doing this deliberately. But it can be, something that has an impact on, your brand as well. So if you're considering China, put that one on the list sort of sooner rather than later. Because if you don't file first, you're stuffed.
I think this is really important, the whole branding and trademarks conversation, because fundamentally we spend all this time, money and energy supporting, breathing life into our startups, into our ventures. And what holds that value together to a large extent is the brand, like it's how it's represented to the marketplace. And obviously, for the most part, entrepreneurs are doing the best they can to make sure that they're treating customers well. And if you haven't protected that brand, and then others can just quickly manipulate you or leverage off what you've created, it's really important to protect that hard work that you put into building a brand in the marketplace.
Definitely. And sometimes that can be part of your IP strategy as well. So quite often if I'm, talking to someone who's working on a product that's cool, but not necessarily registrable as a patent or a design, or we can't use some of those other sort of IP options to protect the item itself, we'll talk about how the branding can give you a bit of a quasi-protection. So a great example is Pandora. So Pandora is all the charm bracelets, right? So charm bracelets aren't new. They do have a couple of patents for their little clasping mechanism that stops the charms falling off. But the concept generally of charm bracelets and selling little charms and that sort of stuff is not new. It's not patentable. It's not sort of registrable as any other kind of IP. But their trademark portfolio is crazy. I think at last check, they had about 42 trademarks registered. And then they've done a really good job of using the branding, strongly, consistently, really pushing it out hard. And it's really built up the value, and people will pay silly money for tiny little charms because it's Pandora. And Michael Hill started its own sort of competitive business, which was Emma & Rowe, selling charms. And there's no issue with selling charm bracelets. There's no IP on the concept or the charms themselves, no issue with that. But they couldn't use Pandora or anything substantially identical or deceptively similar. So they're called Emma & Rowe. And I suppose they thought they were going to have the same kind of traction because charm bracelets are in. But Pandora already has enough of reputation. People want Pandora. They want the fancy Pandora stuff. They don't want the, poor cousin that's following behind. And Emma & Rowe is now being shut down. Like, that was started by Michael Hill. This isn't some dude in a garage, and it still hasn't been able to compete with something that has no IP except for really strong branding and registered trademarks.
And that's true. Like, say, for example, as a startup, you're looking to advertise and leverage off somebody else's trademark on Google AdWords or Facebook. You can't do that when you've got a registered trademark. Google won't allow it. Well, they can't allow it because you can't then advertise on those keywords because they're registered trademarks.
Yeah.
Just quickly, I know you've talked to me about this before, but the R as opposed to the TM on your logos?
Yeah, so the R is for a registered trademark. So once you've put your application in, it's gone through the entire process and you've got a certificate, then you can use the R. If you don't have any of the above or it hasn't quite yet hit registration, you can use the TM, which essentially says I'm using this as a trademark, but it's a common law trademark. So it can be useful in some disputes about whether or not you're using it as a branding device. But to me, it says, hi, this is unregistered. So it's a red flag to me.
yeah, if you register this, I'm using this and trying to create value from it, but I haven't registered it yet. So if you register, anyway, so R's important. Use R, don't use TM.
Yeah, we'll get it registered, then use R.
Yeah, only use R when you've registered it. Yeah, of course. Don't put TM on your logos because it has no real value in a positive sense.
No.
Cool. Is there anything else that we haven't covered off that you are aware of?
I don't think so. That's the main sort of flags I wanted to put out for branding.
Yeah, that's cool. Lots in that. It is fundamentally pretty simple though when you bring it back to like just choosing a good name and then going through the process of securing that IP, because if you do that up front, it's not super expensive trademarks from what I understand, unless you're looking to register trademarks from around the world. It's probably one of the ones that it's not as arduous as a patent application as well. So make sure you get it done. Awesome. Thank you again for your time, Donna. I'll have your contact details and more information down in the comments below. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and until the next masterclass, take it easy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.